Ready? I want Chris. Dr. Harold Levinson has come up with a fascinating and much discussed and has attracted the attention of the professional community with his thesis that children or anybody with dyslexia has an inner ear dysfunction. And what's fascinating about this, or what's important about this, is a whole lot of people have dyslexia. We can only guess or wonder how many young children are in school being accused of laziness, whose parents have had it suggested that they are LD, learning disabilities. We have letters now to identify all kinds of things that we don't really understand. Not to mention children who have been, it has been suggested, have emotional problems, maybe even brain damage. Now, many, many young people are carrying these burdens of failure through the formative years and are emotionally crippled by the time they get to be 18, 20, 22 years old, have come to believe that they are no good, when the fact is they may have a physical difficulty that has largely gone undiscovered lo these many years. How am I doing so far, Doctor?
Wonderful.
Yeah?
I hope I can follow.
Okay. First of all, give me some of the dyslexics can't read or have difficulty reading.
Yes.
But you want to be careful. There's a lot of people who can't read who don't have dyslexia.
That's true.
There's a lot of dyslexics who can read.
Right.
So this is going to be a real tough show for me. You know what I'm saying? It is tough.
I'll simplify it.
Do.
Okay. The type of reading problem and learning problem that dyslexics have characterizes the disorder. It's not whether they read or they can't read that defines it. Usually there's a delay in reading. Their memory for letters and words is a little unstable when they start off. As they read, they'll mix up letters like B's and D's, and then they start to learn words and they'll mix up was and saw and on and no. Finally, when they're reading, what happens is they start to skip letters and words. They scramble. They lose their place when they're reading sentences. And they tend to use a finger marker to compensate for their tracking problem.
They also might watch television with their head tilted. Would it be this severely tilted as I'm doing now?
Not noticeably, but sometimes if you look back on family pictures, you notice that the kids are always tilting their head during a picture taking, one way or the other, or slightly to one side. You look shocked.
Well, yeah, because I do that.
I won't make the obvious conclusion.
But one of the points you want to make here is to avoid simplistic diagnoses. Huh?
Obviously. Writing, for example, is also affected. Very often, kids with this problem, their writing is messy, but most often it tends to tilt. If they're writing on a blank piece of paper, the writing will tend to go up or tend to go down. The spacing will be poor, and the letter size will be uneven. If they draw, sometimes they'll even tilt things to one side or another. Their spelling is usually bad. They misspell words, they'll reverse B's and D's and was and saw even during their writing and spelling, and sometimes they'll spell backwards.
Yeah. An example of the kind of writing about which you spoke a moment ago is included in your book here, and it shows right there. This is just some idea of what you're talking about.
You see how it tilts? It tilts down, and the letters are poor. It looks like a doctor's prescription, basically.
Now, what's very important about this is apparently there are millions of us who have it.
Roughly 20% of the population has this problem to some degree or other.
That's 1 out of every 5 people.
That's true.
But 5 or 6 times as many boys have it as girls.
That was thought to be the case. I discovered that that's not true. 5 times as many boys are referred to clinicians because boys with this problem, in my opinion, get much more frustrated. They act up, and they're expected to compete and earn a livelihood despite equal rights. And
so the pressure on them because of this difficulty is greater, you're saying?
Tremendous.
And more recognizable. A girl can coast through these problems?
Girls tend to be easier going, and they ride by it. However, they show up later in life with emotional symptoms.
Now, let's not just go over this one more time. If you know, the enormity of what you're talking about here is, it becomes overwhelming when you realize that there are lives out there that have been ruined because of misunderstanding and knee-jerk, quick-draw labeling of young people.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Yes.
And there are kids being tested through the years who really have what is essentially a localized physical dysfunction.
Which is simple. It's in the inner ear rather than in the thinking brain where it was formerly thought to be. And my own opinion is diagnosis like minimal brain damage or retarded or stupid is a deadly terminology. It just adds insult to injury. And patients who have this problem, no matter how bright they are, no matter how successful they are, feel stupid. And as a result, it encouraged me to write a more popular book called Smart But Feeling Dumb, which captures the essence of what this problem does to an individual. Mm-hmm. They feel dumb a whole lifehood, despite the fact that they're bright, competent, and the smarter they are, the dumber they feel.
They also compensate too, don't they?
They compensate for the problem, which confused many authorities. Many individuals with this problem learn to read. They read in a strange way. They scan, they're bright, they put things together, they memorize pages. However, the symptoms still persist. They have to force themselves. They have to struggle 10 times harder than a normal individuals, and as a result, there have been many famous dyslexics. General Patton, Einstein was alleged to have been one.
Thomas Edison?
Edison is another one, and unbelievable. I have many professionals in my practice who have it. They've just pushed extra hard.
Am I to understand that you're correcting dyslexia by giving people Dramamine?
Well, it's not that simple, but it's a series of antihistamines. Once I discovered where the problem was, then I could devise a medical way of treating it. This is the first time there's been a medical way of diagnosing the problem, a medical way of pre-diagnosing it before a kid identifies himself 3 years behind in their reading or writing. And it's the first time there's been a medical treatment for this problem.
Now, when you say that the problem is in the inner ear, what you're saying is the problem is a dysfunction of that feature of our brain, motor, emotional, electromagnetic, biochemical system that allows us to keep our balance and also to focus on something stationary if we happen to be in motion.
That's true, but I also discovered that the inner ear system, which also involves a computer behind it called the cerebellum, what that does is it acts like the vertical and horizontal knobs on a television set. It maintains the picture coming in a steady, clear fashion, visually, acoustically, and touch and motion. The whole input is organized by the inner ear system, so that what happens is if that inner ear system isn't working, the picture is drifting, it's coming into the brain. It's then sent to the thinking brain for understanding. But a thinking brain can't comprehend and remember a drifting picture any more than the audience could understand what was going on this television set if the picture started to drift and blur out.
So what we've got then are, you're saying 20% of the kids in school today, and this doesn't even speak to the problem of school, but they're sitting in a school and they are in effect receiving scrambled pictures in math, reading, whatever other curriculum may be given to them.
Yes.
And they're in effect saying, I can't do this. I don't get this. And they become shy, retiring, maybe even antisocial. I don't know what happens to them.
Or they start acting up. They become what's called overactive or hyperactive. They, in a sense, get the school to kick them out. They just don't want to be there. Many develop school phobias and don't want to go to school. Many become truant. Many will turn to drugs.
Let me introduce you to, at this moment, one of one of the world's most famous dyslexics. Never thought I'd ever introduce this guy this way. You know him as a very talented person in entertainment now and acting, and you know him also as the man who won the decathlon at the 1976 Olympics at Montreal. Please welcome Bruce Jenner. Sit down here. I want to mic you up here to get you going.
Got it. Thank you.
Nice hand.
Thank
You did not do well in school, true?
Very true. Yes, very true. I got started very slow, and at the time, there weren't a lot of people that were out looking for people that had that term dyslexia. It was just, I was a slow reader, especially getting started, and that because of that, you, like the doctor said, you start to feel dumb, you start to feel like you can't handle it, you're slower than the rest. It becomes very difficult for you. I was held back in second grade. to try to maybe mature a little bit more so maybe I could handle the problem and do a little bit better. But it was very, very difficult for me at the start.
When did they put a name on what you had? Do you remember that?
I can't remember the specific time. I would have to say I was at least in high school, in your late teens, before they really ever said anything about it. Well, it may be dyslexia. And now, for me, it seems that word dyslexia is a very broad term, can be pinned on anybody. You know, if he has like a reading problem, yes, or a visual problem, you know, they can say, oh, he's dyslexic, and they can put it away. But nobody really pinpointed it until later on down the line. And then still, they never gave me a cure. They just said, you're dyslexic, and say, see you later. You know, that was about it.
Actually, most parents are very relieved to find that their child is dyslexic, because it means that there's no brain damage, he doesn't have a learning disability, there's no retardation. All of those anxieties that overwhelm parents go away when you come in with this big word and talk about the inner ear.
Plus some. Many parents are blamed by clinicians that it's their fault, that somehow it was emotionally caused, and even if they're not blamed by clinicians, they blame themselves. And then, unfortunately, what happens is once they're given a term, they're relieved initially, but then there's no medical treatment for it.
Yeah.
You're still stuck with it.
How'd you do in math?
I was good in math. I did very well in math. Everything around reading, I mean, reading was the only problem, really, and that would cause other problems because it doesn't give you any confidence in yourself intellectually. It wasn't until really with the games and a lot of the things that have happened since then that I've really sort of been able to get a grasp of myself intellectually and be able to have confidence in myself that I can go in and handle something intellectually until I started to get out into the big bad world and started to do things.
Do you recall feeling self-conscious in those meetings when...
Terribly.
Really?
Terribly self-conscious.
What was it that was making you that way? Was it your perceived...
No background that I had because of the reading, because of getting started in school and always being in the slower reading classes and the slower classes, not having that confidence that you can go into the situation. I would just stay quiet. I would just be in the back and wouldn't say much at all and let everybody else sort of make decisions for me. But then I'd go back and sit down and say, wait a second, I could have made that decision. Why couldn't have I done that? Why couldn't have I, as far as a career move or something like that? I'm intellectually just as good as anybody else, but it takes a long time to be able to do it.
How's your reading? How do you read now?
It's not bad. It's below what it should be. I have, you know, in the business that I'm in, you have a lot of reading to do. You have teleprompters that you have to read and things like that. I've learned to compensate for it mainly by memorizing. And I can memorize very quickly just because my whole life I've had to do that.
You memorize speeches as well, don't you?
Yeah, speeches.
So when you go to the podium, then you've got your material memorized, is that right?
Yeah, I don't use any cue cards, anything. Sports shows that I do a lot of, it's all memorization. I mean, they don't give you any cue cards, no nothing. I mean, you have to get out there and you get 5 minutes to say, hey, you've got 2 minutes to make this point, you've got to do it. And I feel I'm better that way than I would be if I had a script, actually, a teleprompter.
How did this difficulty, which this mysterious little Bruce Jenner must have something wrong with him thing, and that must have been in there a long time, huh, for you?
Long time, long time.
How did that weigh on becoming the decathlon winner? The most grueling, most challenging, most awful, painful. Why am I here? Depression. I can't imagine. The body is giving up. The oxygen is leaving. And you won it. You know, there are other people with your physical gifts.
Yeah.
So
well,
you beat them.
For one reason, I think, because of the reading problems and problems that I had getting started, was one of the main reasons I got into sports. Because I think every young person needs a pat on the back. They need to say by their peers that you did a good job. Well, I'd never get that in school. I was always hiding that. You know, I was trying to get away from that. All of a sudden, when I was in junior high school, all of a sudden there was sports. And I could get out there, and I could do well. And I could go home and feel proud of myself because I did something physically. And because of that, I think I continued to work very hard at sports and to get maybe a bigger pat on the back because of that, because I wasn't getting it in other areas. Well, I think that just started the pattern to eventually down the line, when it came down to deciding, you know, in my early 20s what I was going to do, well, I decided I wanted to run the decathlon, and that was my point. And to this day, my strongest point in the decathlon was how I could handle it mentally. The biggest pressure situation that I would have, I would always score better in that. And it seems like it gave me so much confidence in myself because of my mentally that I could handle it. From that point on, my decathlon really started to blossom.
What was your toughest event in the decathlon, for you?
I don't think I had one specific event that was tougher than the other.
Well, you scored variously, I mean.
Yeah, you scored variously. I would have to say like the pole vault probably would be the biggest single point getter And that's what I started out as, a pole vaulter, when I was just
Okay, but that was, you're saying you were especially skilled at that.
Was my better event. I think my biggest attribute was training for it, and my mental capacity was my strongest point.
But I think you're here to say that if it had not been for these real scary second-class feelings about yourself and who you were and confusion, you would not have had that. You were almost neurotically motivated.
Yes, definitely. If I would have gone, and I've thought about this a lot, because if I would have gone through school and just breezed right through and done a good job and had no problem, I don't think I would have been motivated in sports. And I think as time went on and I got more heavily into it, yes, I definitely, because of my background, I mean, I really grasped it. That was the one thing I could do. I could do it well, and it was all up to me. Nobody else was out there running or trying to score points. It was just myself.
But what we have to wonder about is how many dyslexics don't have his physical gifts. If you cannot do the 1,500 meter, if you're not, these children are being thrown on almost on a bone pile. Certainly a neurotic one.
It's a disaster. Even for somebody gifted as Bruce, it was almost a disaster had you not been gifted physically in some way.
It definitely would have been.
In some of my patients, I even found that the disorder is sometimes a catalyst for succeeding. You have to succeed or you can't survive and you can't go on living. It's a disaster.
The issue is dyslexia. We have Dr. Harold Levinson also at hand as Bruce Jenner. We've got some other dyslexics here who want you to hear their story. And I don't have to say why this is important. Who do we know that might be? We hope you'll join us.
You're out of your mind.
You're out of the game. Take a powder.
Great idea. I love to take a powder with Johnson's baby powder. Just a little assist makes me feel cool after a hot game. So I always take time out for this dry, comfortable feeling.
Hey, Nancy. Take you to dinner?
Ed, take a powder.
Yeah.
For a cool, dry, comfortable feeling, take a powder with Johnson's baby powder, only from Johnson & Johnson.
Looks like the bears are having breakfast, Grandpa.
Appreciating nature is our family tradition. That's why we eat grape nuts. The goodness of grape nuts comes compliments of nature. Comes from the special way they blend nature's wheat and barley to bring out its own special taste. Good nutty taste.
And a real crunch.
Only Grape Nuts has it. Post Grape Nuts cereal with a crunchy good taste. Compliments of nature.
Dr. Levinson is here with Christian Sachs. You're 9, is that right, Christian?
Yes, I am.
And Christian is a dyslexic person.
Right.
Okay. You've developed a test which helps at least to determine whether or not you've got the symptoms, huh?
Yes. This is a very simple test, and it's independent of reading, writing, spelling, and all the skills. It's basically a physical test. And what I do is I speed up a series of elephants, which you can see on the screen. And what happens is there's a point where those elephants blur out for everybody and can't be seen. That's dependent on eye movements, and eye movements are controlled by the inner ear. Now, Christian...
Can we, before we do Christian, let's pick out a subject of the audience. Can we do that? And all they have to do is tell us when that starts to blur, right?
Raise your hands as soon as you see the elephants blurring. Yeah, there's a point where most...
Well, slow them down. Now, wait a minute. Hold it. All right, go slower now. Go slower. All right. All right, now just gradually speed up.
Okay.
Keep going. All right, there it is. You're not blurred?
Most individuals will blur right around that point. The rest are afraid to...
Dizzy, but not
The rest are afraid to put their hands up for one reason.
All right, now do that for Christian. Do it for Christian.
Okay, Christian, raise your hand as soon as you see the elephants blurry or fuzzy. Are they clear now?
Yes.
Okay. Let me know as soon as they start to get fuzzy.
Right now.
Now, what do they look like to you?
They look bigger than they really are, and they look deformed.
Okay, when I increase it just a little bit more, what happens?
They get smaller.
And what about now?
Now they're just the normal size.
And eventually, it looks like that to him, basically. Now, there's another part of the test which is also quite simple, and it mainly affects young dyslexics. Christian, are the elephants clear now?
Yes.
Okay, let me know what happens when I move the lines.
They start to get bigger than they really are, and you can't see like their trunk.
Yes.
And that becomes all blurry, and they become round.
Okay. Now, what happens when I slow up the lines?
They become back to normal size. You can see their trunks and their feet, and they look normal again.
Okay. Do they look like they're moving at all?
Yes.
Which way?
To my left.
You want to show the audience? There may be some dyslexics out there who don't know right from left. Which way?
Like down.
Right. Okay. And we'll go through this a little more. Now, what happens is this will reverse itself in a second, I hope. Which way are the elephants moving now?
They're moving backwards to my right.
And are they clear or fuzzy?
They're fuzzy.
Let me know when they get clear.
They're clear right now.
Now, this is basically the simplicity of the test, and it makes it possible to individually screen almost every child prior to starting school, prior to developing reading problems, prior to falling 2, 3, 4 years behind, feeling stupid, and whatnot.
Boy, and it keeps you out of all those offices with all those people, with all those tests and the squares and the circles and the triangles. You know what you've got here and what you've done here has been, let me just make this point, very well received by the scientific community. Yes, you have your critics, and in fact, you give them a certain amount of attention in your own book. But by and large, many big shots really think you're onto something here. And we can only really guess at the consequences of what you've done here. The relief that you will bring parents just by being able to sort out these young people who are being deposited in classrooms with, in effect, a faulty vertical and horizontal knob in their brains.
It's a relatively simple problem, but if it goes unrecognized, if it goes misdiagnosed, you've heard the disaster, and I think when you speak to the rest of my patients here, you'll see what has happened to them, what could have happened had they not responded to medication.
And we'll do that. Thanks, Christian. And we want you to... Incidentally, some dyslexics have a difficulty determining left from
That's
right.
a very common problem because the inner ear is a compass to the brain, and it tells you instinctively where your right is, where your left is, where up and down is. If you have this problem, many individuals will not know right and left instinctively. They'll have to use their brain to figure it out. They'll remember there's a scar on one hand, or that they've thrown a ball and the hand they throw it with is their right hand. And thus, if they're asked, they'll quickly be able to reason it out, but they instinctively don't know it.
10% of dyslexics are left-handed?
No, 10% of the population is left-handed, and thus 10% of dyslexics are left-handed.
So
There's
therefore
no
it means
correlation.
nothing.
It doesn't mean anything.
Okay, well, it was in your book, and I wondered why you put it in.
Because most people have thought some time ago that there was a relationship between left-handedness and dyslexia, and I disprove that.
There isn't.
Just like they thought there was a relationship between males and dyslexia, and the only relationship is that males become emotionally more upset and thus show up more often.
And we'll be back in just a moment. Christian's mother is here, Rita Sachs. So you've seen the world, haven't you, with this thing?
Yes, I did.
Christian is 9 years old.
Right.
And what'd you think you had here?
Well, at the beginning, we really didn't know what we had.
Well, you must have been scared to death, though. What was the problem? What were the teachers calling on?
No, it was before the teacher. It really started it. He was 4 or 5 years old. He didn't know his color. Well, he knew them 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, he didn't recognize them.
Colors?
Colors. He started with that. We thought he was putting us up at the beginning. We didn't believe that he...
Right.
And his big brother will call him, oh, you dumb. You don't know your color.
Stupid, dumb.
Yes, and all that. Then when he went to school, I started to realize that he didn't really know his color. I mean, recognize them all the time. That's what I mean. And of course, he went in the school, and he didn't learn a thing in kindergarten. Right away, I have a good pediatrician, and he said, we'll have him not psychoanalyzed, but send it to a psychologist.
Yeah.
And this is really where it was really bad. When I took him, he was coming back, he went through the test, he came back in the car, and he says to me, am I dumb or something? I have to go see a psychologist. And I knew he was in. People who knew him think he was very bright, and some people will even tell him, you must be doing good in school. Because verbally, he could talk about anything.
But he was really overwhelmed at school and not achieving.
Oh, yes, exactly.
How old was he when you finally figured this out?
That was in kindergarten. We put him in, we took him in the school. He was in Catholic school. We put him in the public school because the government was sponsoring at the time, small class. So the psychologist gave us three choices. Leave him there and nothing. Put him in the public school, he has a better chance, or a private school. So we tried, and it didn't work either, because they wanted to keep him back in the 2nd grade. And
okay, with not much time, when was the eureka? I mean, was there a day when did you first hear the word dyslexia?
Well, I read in the newspaper about Dr. Levinson.
Yeah.
And right away, it makes sense to me, the balance. I said, to my husband, we are going to go see Dr. Levinson. And then this is why I made an appointment, and that was the first. They used to call him learning disability patient. That's what they call learning disability.
Yeah.
And Dr. Levinson used the first time used dyslexia for him. It was in June.
This past?
This past June.
And you've noticed already?
Since he was in a private school, we took him out of public and put him in a private school because they wanted to keep him in 2nd grade, and we thought psychologically it wouldn't be good for him.
Now, what's he taking? Is he on some medication?
Dr. Levinson put him on medication in June. He will tell you what it is.
Is this like a...
It's an antihistamine, a special antihistamine.
Antihistamine, you mean like contact?
Well, similar. It's called, the particular one that he was on is called meclizine.
And it does what?
It basically fine-tunes the knobs in the television set, in the inner ear system. And I think it would be helpful if Mrs. Sachs could describe to you what the difference was and how fast, and maybe Christian too.
Oh, in a week, there was a big difference. He couldn't read, you know, he will read this way, or lose his place reading. And what, a small word like that or the, he will recognize it 3 times, and the 4th time will come up and he wouldn't know what it was.
We're talking about you, Christian. This sounds really dramatic.
Well, not really.
But did you notice that you were writing straight instead of curved?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, very much.
Did you have any feeling, or could you understand it? Tell us your feeling as these changes began to happen.
Well, I was very happy because, like, before, I'd pick up a book and I would start to read it. And, like, every time I got to a word that I couldn't, like, read, I'd put the book down.
Quit.
Yeah, because I couldn't read it. So now, like, I'll pick it up and I'll read the first 20 words, and then, like, once a word will come up and I'll ask my mother. So now I'll keep on reading instead of putting the book down.
You must have had some very painful moments with this.
Yes.
People at school, you must have felt, boy, I'm no good.
Yeah, when I found out, like, when I was in 3rd grade, that I was reading in a 2nd grade level. That didn't do too good.
How did you cope? I mean, when you're sitting there in the class and the teacher's up there with the blackboard and all that, what did you do? Just coast, or did you sort of say nothing or retreat? Or?
Well, like in math, I was very good until we got into the timetables. And then I just sort of didn't ask any questions. I started to just listen, and like when I got it, I wouldn't understand.
He also had difficulty memorizing the multiplication tables, which is a very common problem with dyslexics. And after the medicine, what happened?
Well, I don't know because I haven't did the timetables yet.
What you did your reading, Christian.
All right, well, we're counting on you, Christian. This is thank you very much for sharing a very personal part of your lives with us. It's a very important story, and we can only wonder how many other Christians are out there struggling with. And you know what? You know what you think of how many kids are getting drugged?
That's the problem. When Barry had to go on...
You're Rosalind Swartz. Right. Yes, ma'am.
When Barry went on medication, and the doctor suggested medication for her, I couldn't accept that so readily, because she was just coming into her 12th year, and considering the society that we live in and the drug culture that we live with, I didn't want Barry to think that a pill was the answer to a problem. You pop a pill and you're fine.
Barry Joy is your daughter, and she's with us. Now, so you're the parent of a dyslexic.
Yes, I
you
also
yourself
have
are
dyslexia.
not. Huh?
I also have dyslexia.
Oh, you are? You do? So did you recognize it right away then?
What I recognized in Barry was her constant effort that she put into her schoolwork, and yet academically, when it was looked at by the teacher, it didn't coincide with the amount of effort that she put into it. And I remember when I was in school, the teacher telling my mother, because the teachers were God in those days, Rosalind doesn't pay attention, and I would go home and get punished. You've got to pay attention. Your schoolwork is no good. But I remember trying, and I saw the same thing in Barry. And when I would go to the teachers, and they would say, well, she's just, she's not trying hard enough. And that's when I realized there was a problem, but it was a borderline type of problem. It wasn't that overt that you could pick it up immediately.
Barry Joy, you understand Christians.
Yeah.
You had the same problem.
Yes.
Tell us just one little item that particularly sticks out in your mind regarding being discouraged and so on.
I remember when I was just beginning to do math in my earlier years of elementary school, my mother was trying to help me with addition, and I was sitting there. She had pennies laid out on the table to help me add up 4 and 1 and all along all the numbers. And my brother would be sitting there calling out the answers, and he's 2 years younger than I am, and he's sitting there calling out all the answers, and I'm sitting there, how does he know, and I can figure it out a lot better than I can, and I would be very frustrated, and that would happen to me.
We have other people we want to meet here, and we will do that in a moment. You're identifying with all this, huh, Bruce?
I really am. It's surprising a lot of the similarities that you go through. The only similarity I didn't have is that nobody really diagnosed it when I was younger. Like, talk about being left back in 2nd grade. I was left back in 2nd grade, you know, and you know, to give me another year to sort of mature. So there's a lot of similarities. You know?
Do you remember being? Do you remember the feeling of humiliation, or I don't want if it's not there?
Yeah, the biggest fear of my life to date is when I was younger, having to get up in front of the class and read. You know, they send, everybody runs down the thing, you read this paragraph, you read the next paragraph. That was the biggest. I used to sit in my classroom, my hands sweating, I mean, just total fear of having to get up and read in front of the class because I knew I'd be humiliated. I mean, I could go against the Olympic Games, take everybody on in the world, but that was the biggest fear of my life right there.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
What kind of quick word of advice would you have for teachers who think they know a student who has dyslexia?
I think the quickest word of advice is to recognize the symptoms.
We're talking about dyslexia. We should probably put that word up so that everybody knows how to spell it. Excuse me, Doctor.
Anyway, I think the best advice to teachers is to really read Chapter 2 in my book, which describes the symptoms.
Well, they're laughing because we have a lot of book salesmen on this show.
I'm not trying.
Let's make the point that this is not sit by the fire, cozy kind of read. This is tough stuff you've got.
It's not easy reading, but it describes all the symptoms, the reading, the writing, the spelling, the math, the phobias that later develop, the behavior disorders, the overactivity, the distractibility, the compass difficulties, the right-left difficulties, feeling klutzy, and obviously not having Bruce's skill coordination. And if you can recognize the symptoms and try to explain it to the children and the parents, at least they know that they're not stupid, they're not dumb. There's one problem radiating out to multiple symptoms.
Dr. Levinson, I wanted to ask you what you specialize in.
Psychiatry and neurology.
I'd like to know, is it always inherited, or can it be acquired from an ear injury or infection? Or?
It's not always acquired. I discovered that ear infections in early childhood can either cause it or aggravate the disorder.
I had an ear infection.
Yes.
I had ear infection.
Yeah, here you see, ear infections.
That's the first time I ever heard that.
It's, you know, it was never thought to be significant because when they thought it was a brain problem, what did ear infections have to do with it?
I remember when I was a little kid having to go get shots because my ears would get infected so easily.
And what happens is if you have severe ear infections, it affects the compass in the inner ear, and that sets off or could cause the problem.
Dr. Levinson, would you like to see this test that you have implemented in a pre-kindergarten screening used in all of the schools?
I've already screened a whole district, and obviously this is what I would like to happen eventually. Before kids go to school, I'd like them all to be screened.
So this is a permanent physical disorder? I mean, can this just be treated through your medication, or is
it's a permanent physical disorder that one can compensate for on their own, and we can help compensate them with proper education and medication.
I have a son who's been diagnosed as having exotropia. He's also had open heart surgery twice and been diagnosed as minimal brain damage. Would there be any relationship here, because he does have some of the same?
Most of what is called minimal brain damage is dyslexia. They just use a vague general term, which in my opinion is a disaster.
It would seem that somebody with dyslexia would have trouble reading music. Are there any famous musicians that have dyslexia?
There are. I don't know them by hand. I know I have very excellent musicians in my practice. For some reason, they don't have as much difficulty with music because they memorize it. Yes.
I have a son who is labeled hearing impaired, but I have noticed he's got a lot of these symptoms that you talk about. How could I tell with him being hearing impaired, you know, whether he has this?
I discovered another interesting fact. Most hearing impaired individuals who have a hearing impairment of the 8th nerve, the 8th nerve goes into the brain with the inner ear nerve. If you have deafness or significant deafness, it means you've had some infection. It also affects the inner ear, and most of the problems they have with learning are due to dyslexia. It's not all due to the deafness.
Roberta Raven, you've been most patient. We're finally getting to you. You are a housewife. You are also dyslexic.
Yes.
You also have had trouble living in a large residence. Is that right?
Well, it's not that I had trouble. It's that I had trouble just functioning. I only found out 2 years ago that I was dyslexic. I had no idea. My IQ was so high I was able to get by in school, but was considered lazy. But I had trouble just getting through day-to-day things, and I couldn't dance, and I couldn't skate, and I couldn't drive. So I was a spectator in life. Now what has happened is that little apartment is a 10-room house, which I manage, and a kennel, and I'm going to open up a bookstore next month, and I'm painting. So my
You're
life
really going after
has
it.
increased 80%.
Your life has what?
The activity in my life has increased 80%, I would say.
Roberta couldn't walk, drive, or go up an escalator, an elevator, or...
Physically, I was off balance. If you touched me, I could fall down.
Really? And you did?
Well, the coordination is a great deal better. Some of the phobias I still will have time to work through because I've had these phobias for 20 years, like driving. I don't think I'll be comfortable driving. But I could go to school if my son forgets his lunch, and I can get to the grocery store. I don't really like it, but I can do it. I think the biggest thing is, though, I'm really worried about the children who will have to go through the things of feeling stupid as I did, and to forgive myself now, finally, for being such a klutz and a closet stupid person, and they didn't know. I thought I had a high IQ for IQ tests.
Yeah. You said, in other words, you're a closet stupid person.
Well,
meaning...
I thought I was stupid, and I didn't want to tell the teachers, and
I
they would test me, and they would have my parents in. They said she's genius, and you know, doing C work, she needs a beat.
And you were explaining your high test scores.
Well,
that you had this narrow ability to take tests.
I could take tests well, but I worked real hard and got average grades.
Yeah.
I think the worst part about dyslexia is the fact that I don't think it's the physical problems as well as the psychological problems, because it starts to stunt your growth as a human being.
Yeah.
You put up roadblocks for yourself. Driving, if I had to get somewhere, driving a car, and I had to follow the instructions, forget it. I get terribly lost. I can't tell the left from the right. If you tell me to make a left turn, I have to do it because my wedding ring's on my left hand. If I have to go up and down an escalator, I start to freeze. We were in the elevator last night. It's a glass elevator, and I start seeing the walls move. And again, people do have phobias, but when you're dyslexic and you have a middle ear disorder,
it makes it worse.
Your balance is not there. So my whether I would have a phobia, whether I'm dyslexic or not, my phobia is more pronounced as a result of
Bruce.
It's funny because they say these fears. I just the opposite. I really don't have, I mean, athletically, I just didn't have any trouble, you know. I worked very hard at it. But also, like now, even today, I mean, I fly aerobatic planes. I fly upside down in loops and rolls, and everybody's afraid to go with me. And you know, I do things like that, and I don't have phobias of any type of movement. I've raced automobiles at over 200 miles an hour and things like that.
How was your writing? How was your writing when you were younger?
How was my what?
Was your writing messy?
Yeah, it wasn't that good. Until I worked on it, because I wanted to get a gold seal.
What it
so I worked on it real hard.
What it shows is writing takes coordination, and what I've discovered is you can be discoordinated in one function and superbly coordinated in others. Roberta's an artist, for example, and yet she can't walk, in a sense, or couldn't walk.
Yeah.
And crowds would paralyze her. I think it would be worthwhile discussing that too. Too much stimulation in a crowd throws the television set off. They just can't handle too much input, and she would panic.
I would walk into gym class when I was in school, and as soon as I would get into the gymnasium, I would pass out. The fear was so great because I couldn't function in gym. I flunked gym in college. If I walked into a cocktail lounge and people started dancing, it looked like a can of worms, and I would pass out if I didn't remove myself because it was too much for me to handle.
So she's having an overload of a lot of sensory information and an inability to organize it.
Exactly, just like motion sickness. Too much motion and you can't organize it. You can have too much visual or auditory input.
Is there a common feature of motion sickness in dyslexic people? I mean, do you find car sickness, elevator sickness, airplanes, motion?
There's an increased incidence. Not every individual will have it, and some can be superbly tolerant to it.
One thing you said there that I do have, I have a terrible tendency when somebody's talking to me to have something like maybe a TV on and be totally and not be able to, my mind is wandering.
Yeah.
My mind is just going, and I really
You're
have
easily distracted, you're saying.
Well, very easy. And it drives like my wife nuts. You know, sometimes I'll be talking to her and she'll be looking at me and she knows I'm off on another subject, and my mind always seems to be going all the time.
You know what that's like? The moving lines. If you're looking at the elephants and the lines move, the lines distract the individual, and the foreground, the elephants, blur out. To some extent, the same is true with sound and visual input at the same time.
And a dyslexic often, but not always, can't dismiss intellectually the background.
Exactly. It scrambles the whole thing, and it drives them crazy or irritates them.
And we'll be back in just a moment. This is Dr. Hale Levinson's address. He's at 6134 188th Street, Fresh Meadows, New York. The zip there is 11365. While you're looking at that, I'll be happy to show that to you again prior to the end of the program, because we can assume that this is the kind of show that reaches a lot of people, raises a lot of questions. And for those of you interested in methodology, should know that Dr. Levinson, a psychiatrist, neurologist,
yes,
studied over 5,000 young people in the New York City school system. So this is not a theorist who sat somewhere up you know, with his sunroof in the attic figuring this out. This was down in the trenches with a lot of real live human beings who were having difficulty at school, and the results were most surprising. You are very honest to tell us that this inner ear thesis that you've developed and advanced in your book was not necessarily original with you.
Yes, it was original, but I was shocked by the discovery. I didn't anticipate it.
Well, who was it that you give some credit to some folks?
Oh, yes, I had researched this with a Dr. Frank, who was a teacher of mine at Downstate Medical Center when I was a resident. But that was an initial research in 1973. He looked over a bunch of cases and helped me out with it because I wasn't sure that what I was finding was objective. And what I've done is I've sent samples to individuals at different university centers to help me out and see what they found.
So little time. This is Laura Levinson, the daughter of Dr. Levinson. Are you here to tell us that you're dyslexic?
Yep.
And you're not going to tell us your father failed to diagnose it?
He did, for a long time.
He did. So here was this pioneer running off to study dyslexia, and he had it in his own house.
Yep.
What was your symptom?
Well, my handwriting, I always wrote on angles, and my handwriting was very sloppy. Nobody could ever read it.
You always ran at angles?
I used to write with my head on a table like this. Nobody could ever figure out why. I saw it at an angle, so I tilted my head.
Right. And you now are medicated, or you take...
Not anymore.
No, I started her out on medication. She needed it for only a short time and has done extremely well. No longer needs medication.
Now, these medications are not addictive.
No.
Create no dependency.
No.
And have no special side effects?
The only side effect is tiredness, but they can be avoided by changing them or the dose.
Are there special classes that you take to overcome once you find out, or is it just the medication?
No, basically it's an explanation. I see patients in consultation, I explain the thing, and I treat them.
The term dyslexia seems to cover such a broad spectrum of symptoms, and so many people exhibit so many of the same symptoms. how are you going to define it and classify and say, yes, this person is dyslexic?
Yeah, especially when you've got a bureaucratic system dealing with millions and millions of kids, and it's got to be able to go on an IBM card or they don't want to have anything to do with it.
That's true, and that's one of the problems they've had in understanding the problem. Nobody spoke to patients, they just tried to document them with numbers.
Can surgery correct this?
No.
Yeah. Well, wouldn't it be great if all...
Could an ear infection bring upon temporary
Yes.
dyslexia?
Yes.
Temporary, she says. Can you get it and then has it go away?
Yes.
How do the schools deal with this once it's determined that a child has dyslexia?
Variously.
Variously, yes.
How's New York City doing?
They're
Well,
not,
since that's
they're
the,
not equipped to handle it.
they're not equipped, you're saying?
Well, they can't handle the medical part of it. They're doing the best they can, but it's not enough.
I'm almost
All right. I want to know, I have a student, 30 years old, I'm teaching the Laubach reading course, and I feel all these people have told me things that he has, but I can't get him to go anywhere. He says he's perfectly all right.
Well, we'll make a house call. Let me give you a chance to share them. And we'll be back in just a moment.
If you would like a written transcript of today's program, send $2.50 in check or money order to Donahue Transcripts, Box 2111, Cincinnati, Ohio 45201. Include the subject or the name of the guest with your request.
The address, Dr. Harold Levinson, 6134 188th Street, 188th Street, Fresh Meadows, New York. The zip is 11365. Dr. Levinson is the psychiatrist, neurologist who developed the work that's included in this book titled A Solution to the Riddle of Dyslexia, which he's come to believe and really offer a lot of evidence to support his thesis that this is really an inner ear problem.
Yes, doctor, I'd like to know if someone with dyslexia, how they would handle a speed reading program. Would that help them or not?
No. It's variable. I have a few
Services provided and promotional fees paid by the following.
Ever wonder why you're not seeing rebate ads from Volvo? Simple. When you build the right kind of car, you don't have to pay people to buy it.
Super scrubbable True Test Easy Care Latex flat wall and trim finish. Perfect for both walls and woodwork. Sold only by True Value hardware stores and home centers.